This is a truly chilling high school story. Listen closely. The school day had been ordinary until the intercom blared with an urgent message. Lockdown, lockdown, this is not a drill. Fear rippled through the classroom as we scrambled to follow protocol, barricading the door and huddling in silence. But as the minutes stretched into an eternity, I felt the familiar pressure building in my bladder. I whispered to my teacher, explaining my need to use the bathroom. Reluctantly, she nodded, and I slipped out of the room, the hallway eerily quiet. I hurried to the nearest bathroom, feeling exposed and vulnerable. As I entered the bathroom and rushed into a stall, the reality of the situation sank in. I was alone, separated from the safety of the classroom by nothing more than a flimsy door. The sound of my breathing seemed unnaturally loud in the silence, and every creak of the building sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to ignore the rising sense of unease as I hurried to finish, but then I heard it, a soft scratching coming from the stall next to mine. My heart skipped a beat as I froze, my mind racing with terror. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the scratching grew louder, more insistent. Panic surged through me as I realized that someone or something was in the stall next to mine. I held my breath, waiting for some sign of movement, but the scratching continued, relentless and ominous. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, ready to call for help. But before I could dial, the scratching stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was deafening, and I felt a chill run down my spine. And then, just as I thought it was over, I heard a voice, a low guttural whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. "I know you're there," it hissed, its words dripping with malice. I recoiled in horror, my mind racing with fear. Who or what was in the stall next to mine? I wanted to run, to scream for help, but fear rooted me to the spot. And then, with a sickening thud, the door of the stall burst open, and something stepped out into the dim light. It was a figure, cloaked in darkness, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. I screamed, scrambling backward as it advanced toward me, its movements slow and deliberate. I knew then that I was trapped, that there was no escaping the horror that lurked within the confines of the school. And as it reached out to me with clawed hands, I realized, with a sinking feeling, that I would never make it back to the safety of the classroom alive. The school day started like any other, but the atmosphere felt charged with tension, an unspoken sense of unease lingering in the air. Whispers flitted through the hallways, rumors of something sinister lurking in the shadows. I tried to dismiss them as mere gossip, but as the day progressed, the feeling of dread only intensified. Then, during second period, the intercom crackled to life with an urgent message. "Lockdown, lockdown, this is not a drill." Panic surged through the classroom as we scrambled to follow protocol, barricading the door and huddling together in silence. Minutes stretched into hours as we waited, the silence broken only by the sound of our own breathing. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant shout, sent a jolt of fear coursing through my veins. I tried to push down the rising tide of panic, to focus on the rational thought that help would come soon. But as the afternoon wore on and the sun dipped lower in the sky, a sense of hopelessness settled over us like a shroud. Where were the police? Why hadn't they come to rescue us from whatever lurked outside the classroom door? As darkness descended, casting long shadows across the empty halls, I realized with a sinking feeling that we were on our own. Whatever had caused the lockdown was still out there waiting, watching. Then, just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard it, a soft scratching coming from somewhere in the room. My blood turned to ice as I realized that we were not alone. Something was inside the classroom with us, hidden in the darkness, biding its time. Panic surged through me as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of movement. But the scratching continued, growing louder, more insistent, until it seemed to fill the entire room. With a sinking feeling, I realized that the thing in the room with us wasn't human. It was something far more sinister, something that had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. I huddled closer to my classmates, my heart pounding in my chest, as the scratching grew louder and louder. And as the darkness closed in around us, I knew that our nightmare was far from over. The school morning unfolded routinely, students bustling through the hallways to their classes. Yet, as the hours ticked by, an unsettling atmosphere descended upon the school, cloaking it in a palpable unease. Whispers of foreboding spread among the students like wildfire, tales of an ominous presence lurking just beyond the edges of perception. I tried to brush off the rumors as mere superstition, but as the day wore on, the feeling of dread only intensified. It seemed like every shadow held a secret, every corner concealed a threat. Then, during second period, the intercom crackled to life with a chilling message, code red, "This is not a drill. This means we are having a lockdown." Panic surged through the classroom as we scrambled to follow protocol, barricading the door and huddling together in silence. As we waited in the darkness, the minutes stretching into an agonizing eternity, fear gnawed at the edges of my sanity. I tried to focus on my breathing, to block out the chaos raging outside the door. But every sound seemed amplified in the silence, the creak of the floorboards, the distant shouts echoing down the hallway. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. Silence descended over the school like a suffocating blanket, broken only by the sound of our ragged breaths. Hours passed, the sun sinking lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty halls. I felt a knot of fear tighten in my chest as I realized that something was terribly wrong. Where were the police? Where was the help we so desperately needed? With a sinking feeling, I realized that we were on our own, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking up. And as the darkness closed in around us, I knew that whatever lurked in the shadows was hungry for blood. I clung to the hope that help would come, that someone would rescue us from the horrors that lurked within the school. But deep down, I knew that we were alone, and that the nightmare was far from over. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, a scream pierced the silence, a raw, primal sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Panic surged through me as I realized that the danger was closer than I had ever imagined. With trembling hands, I reached for anything I could use as a weapon, my mind racing with desperate thoughts. I knew that if I didn't act fast, it would be too late. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the lights flickered back to life. And the door burst open, flooding the room with blinding light. Police officers stormed in, guns drawn, and the nightmare was finally over. But even as I stepped out into the sunlight, the memory of that day haunted me like a ghost. A reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurks in the most unexpected places. As the school day began, the bustling energy of students filled the hallways, each one hurrying to their classes amidst the morning chaos. But as the hours ticked by, an unsettling shift took hold, enveloping the campus in a thick fog of apprehension. Whispers of ominous tales circulated through the corridors, hinting at hidden dangers lurking just beyond sight. Despite my efforts to shrug off the rumors as nothing more than idle chatter, the tension in the air grew heavier with each passing moment. It felt as though every corner held a potential threat, every shadow concealing unseen peril. Then, during third period, the intercom crackled to life with a chilling command, "Lockdown, lockdown, this is not a drill." Panic rippled through the classroom, propelling us into action as we hastily secured the door. And gathered together in a tight-knit group, the air thick with anticipation and fear. Hours passed in agonizing silence, the minutes stretching into eternity. Fear gnawed at the edges of my sanity as I listened to the distant sounds of chaos outside the door. I tried to focus on my breathing, to block out the terror that threatened to consume me, but it was no use. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, a low growl echoed through the room, sending a shiver down my spine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as the sound grew louder, more menacing. With trembling hands, I reached for anything I could use as a weapon, my mind racing with desperate thoughts. I knew that whatever was on the other side of the door was not human, and that it meant us harm. And then, with a sickening crash, the door burst open, and something stepped into the room. It was a figure, cloaked in darkness, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. I screamed, scrambling backward as it advanced toward us, its movements slow and deliberate. I knew then that we were trapped, that there was no escaping the horror that lurked within the confines of the school. With nowhere left to run, we huddled together in the corner, our cries for help drowned out by the sound of our own terror. And as the darkness closed in around us, I realized with a sinking feeling that our nightmare was far from over. In the end, we were just another statistic, another tragic tale lost in the annals of history. And as the world moved on, forgetting us in its relentless march forward, I couldn't help but wonder what horrors still lurked in the shadows, waiting to claim their next victims.